Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi Hello, hello. Assalamu alaikum. Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone. Do you hear a lot of background noise?
Yeah, I hear a lot of background noise.
Challenging. Seems like I'm cut some of it down, inshallah. Is that better or worse? The same?
Now it's better.
Okay. It doesn't sound like your headphones are plugged in. Let me see. Select speaker. Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me now?
Alaikum salam, yes.
It's weird. It's seeming like it's not allowing me to use my headset as a microphone, which is problematic because you're hearing all the background noise. And I have to be...
Now it's gone.
It's gone? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. MashaAllah. This is going to be an interesting class today. I thought I would have been able to conduct the class from somewhere that I'm not able to be. Now you probably hear a lot of background noise, right? Hello? Background noise is back?
There's still a lot of noise.
Okay, we're going to do our best, inshallah. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, we're going to do our best this way, inshallah ta'ala. You can hear me okay now, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
A
little bit better. Okay. Well, we're gonna, do what we can do, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وأزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وذريته وأهل البيت كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير سألك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات من فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المسيح الدجال ومن عذاب النار وسوء المصير اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم. يا همة الشيخ أثريا بهذا المحضر وتأتي بنظرة تأتيني بظهر. Okay. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Welcome everyone to our weekly Maliki Fiqh class. I'm having some technical difficulties, so thank you for bearing with me. I see some folks in the chat trying to help with suggestions, and I appreciate that. I'm in a coffee shop that has an area that I thought I would be able to sit in that was quiet, but they ended up closing it early today, unbeknownst to me. And my audio on my laptop is not working the way it normally would work. It's not letting me use my headset as a microphone. So, in any case, inshallah ta'ala, today's class is going to be a little bit abbreviated. We're already starting late, but it's going to be a little bit abbreviated. And we'll do our best. And jazakumullah khair for everybody's patience. And inshallah ta'ala, let me know if you're unable to hear me. And I am also, okay, here we go. So inshallah, you at least can hear me and see me, even if the audio isn't quite as clear as we'd like. Alhamdulillah. So one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and make sure we met today, even though I had some, I thought about canceling, but I wanted to make sure we met, even if it's, alaykum salam, I wanted to make sure we met, even if it was for a short amount of time, because we're very close to finishing the book. We might finish it today, actually, inshallah. And I'm excited about that. It's always a blessing when we get a chance to finish a round of a book. And in addition to that, inshallah ta'ala, when we come back, we're going to do, we're going to talk about Ramadan, we're going to talk about fasting, do a refresher on the fiqh of fasting, and we're going to do, I think I'm going to do a short poem on Aqidah, inshallah, because some people have been requesting to have some Aqidah lessons. And also, my good friend, one of my teachers, Sidi Talut Awu, is going to be offering a class very soon, inshallah ta'ala. That's going to be a more extensive class on Aqidah, on belief, Iman, Islamic belief. That's actually written by Sheikh Ahmed Dardir, the author of the book that our lessons are from. Sheikh Ahmed Dardir wrote the book Shara Saghir, which is the book that Dr. Suleiman Dunya used to teach my teacher, Sheikh Amin Abdul Awal. So the lessons are coming from that book. Sheikh Ahmed Dardir also wrote a book called Kharidatul Bahiyya, which is an excellent book of Aqidah. I had the opportunity to study it as well. I'm looking forward to go and do it again. So more on that to come, inshallah ta'ala. But inshallah ta'ala, we're gonna jump in to the lesson for today, and inshallah ta'ala, we're finishing up the lesson that talks about repairing mistakes in prayer. Inshallah ta'ala, where we left off last week, we discussed what to do when you miss a fard in the rak'ah of salat, and then you say salams. I hear some background noise. I don't know if it's coming from my computer or someone else's, but please, if you need to mute yourself, please do so. No, it's like I have some strange feedback. Someone said it's another computer. So if you can, inshallah ta'ala, mute yourself, that would be good. Tayyib. So, to jump into it, inshallah ta'ala, somebody said, is it replay from YouTube? It might be, but let me see. Do we still hear it? Did it go away?
Yeah, it's going now.
Okay, then it must be the replay. I still hear it.
Now it
Yeah,
came
it
back.
comes and goes.
So I think it's from someone else's
You can see
computer.
who it is. Yeah, if you look at participants, you can see exactly who it is.
So my okay, I see it now. I'm so jammed up right now. I'm like, I can't even watch my look. My screen isn't even that clear because I'm outside. Okay, alhamdulillah. I think I found who it was and muted it. I still hear it.
You can see who it is. Yeah, if you look at participants, you can see.
SubhanAllah. It was one of those days, man. Alhamdulillah, just an opportunity for us to be patient. It won't let me mute the person. So inshallah, if everybody could mute themselves, and if you're not on mute, then that's you. Please mute yourself. Okay, inshallah. Well, we're gonna jump into it because we want to at least get the blessing for for meeting, inshallah. Bismillah. So we talked about when you miss a fard in a rakat of a salat, and then you say salams and you start another prayer. This is what we landed on, what we stopped on last week. We said if a person is in a situation where they're making a prayer and they miss a fard in the prayer. Let's say, for instance, you're making dua and you miss a fard in the dua. Maybe you missed, you missed a fard in the dua. You made some kind of mistake in the dua that you would have to make up for, right? And then you start making another prayer. You start making asr. What do you do if after you stood up and started making asr, you realize you made a mistake in dua? Well, if you have not yet made the ruku' of the first rak'ah of your asr, right? Then you have the ability to go back and correct the mistake you made in the dua. You stop where you are, right? And you, based on in your mind, with your intention, you say, no, I'm back in the dua, and I'm making up for the mistake that I missed in my dua. And then you finish your dua. You'll make sujood saw after salams for all this extra movement that you added when you stood up to make asr, right? And that's how you will fix your prayer. Now, if you and I'll read it, and this will help us get a point about what happens if you're making a nafil. So when you miss a fard in the rakat of a salat and then you say salam and start another prayer, you can still correct the previous salat if you remember before you begin to bend for the first rakat. You go immediately to correct the previous salat, canceling the present one by intention. So when you get some farther rakat, and if you end up bending for the ruku of the next prayer, right, then the previous prayer is canceled, right? So if you bend for ruku of asr and you realize that you had a mistake in your dua, then you have to stop and you have to make your dua over again, right? Because you have to make the prayers in their proper succession, right? If the prayer that you are making is a nafil, let's say you finished making dua and you started to make a nafil, you started to make sunnah prayers, you can complete the sunnah prayer, right? If you have not bent for ruku, then stop and go back to complete your dua. But if it's a nafil, right, and you don't realize until after you've bent for the ruku, then you can complete 2 rak'ah of nafila and then go back and begin your dua again. But if after you made dua, you stood up to make asr, right? Excuse me, there's a fire truck passing. If after you make your dua, you stood up to make your asr, right? Then the dua is canceled and the asr is canceled because you can't make asr before you make dua. Now, we talked about that last week, so I'm hoping that people understand that because this is our second time hearing it. But I'll pause for a minute to see if anybody has any questions about that, because I know that's a little bit complicated. So are there any questions about that last point before we move on, inshallah ta'ala? Then the dua is canceled and the asr is canceled. You can't make asr. Now, we talked about that last week, so I'm hoping that you understand that. I see someone took this over. You have a question? Yes, assalamu alaikum.
I just have a quick question. So, I'm trying to keep up with a lot of, if you miss this or if this happens, and then, the qabli and badi and so on. Let's say worst comes to worst, I'm in a situation where because of time, I just need to get this done. Is it permissible to just cancel whatever you're doing and start all over from the beginning as if nothing happened? Or does even that require a qabli or a badi?
So let me try to understand your question. You said let's say you made dua and then you started asr and you realized you made a mistake in dua. Can you just stop and make your dua and asr over again? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and in this situation, and then really in any situation, because I'll get mixed up in terms of, wait, should I make a qabli?
Okay. And when you say qabli ba'di, just for everybody else to benefit, you're saying
Yeah.
making the sujood sal before salams versus making it after salams, right? Before
Yeah,
salams,
exactly.
right. So,
Sometimes I'll realize.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, and then sometimes I realize I made a minor mistake, and I'm like, okay, I should do this awful. And then I get all the way through my prayer, and then I realize, oh shoot, I forgot to make do this. You know, there's other things like that too.
Right. So, first, I'll answer the first part of your question. If you made a mistake in dua, and you stood up to make another prayer, whether it's nafil or asr, and you realize before you been for ruku that you made a mistake, right? It will be faster for you to go back and correct the probably one rak'ah, right, of dhuhr and make sujood sal after salams than it would be for you to start all the way back to the beginning and make your whole dhuhr over again. So it's actually faster if you follow this way, right? If your question is, once you've been for ruku, do you have to finish the nafila or can you go back and make the dhuhr, right? Following the scenario? Let's say you made dhuhr and then you stood up to make a nafila prayer and then you bent for ruku and then you realize, man, I had a mistake in my dhuhr, right? Is that your question? Or part of your question? So in that situation, you can cut the nafila and pray your dhuhr if you don't have enough time, if you're worried that you're not going to have enough time to make your dhuhr or make your dhuhr and asr in their time. You could do that. It's better adab if you finish out the nafila. And 9 times out of 10, if you started a nafila, that means you have a little bit of extra time. You're not so pressed for time, right? So it's better adab if you go ahead and finish your nafila and then go back and make your dhuhr, right? But if you don't have time for some reason, I'm not going to have time to make dhuhr and asr or something like that, so let me break this nafila. You can do that, and there's no penalty because the nafila is extra, right? So if you stopped right there and went back and made dhuhr, you wouldn't be doing anything haram, right? Inshallah. Now, in terms of the other part of your question of what happens if you're like having trouble managing what mistake you made and figuring out, okay, do I make sujood sal before salams, after salams? For that, it's better to make this stuff habitual so that you can get to a point where you're not having to second guess yourself. So in terms of whether you make sujood sal before salams or after salams, it's very simple. The only time you're going to make sujood sal before salams is if you omit saying some Quran after Fatiha in one of the first 2 rak'ah of your prayer. Or if you omit sitting and saying the atashahud after the second rak'ah of a prayer that has more than 2 rak'ah. So any prayer other than Fajr. Those are the only 2. Those are the only 2 things for which you would make sujood sal before salams. Any other mistake you make, you're going to end up adding to your prayer. If you miss a fard, you're going to go back and fix the fard. Now you have extra movements in your prayer, right? Or if you just added an extra rakat to your prayer, right? Or an extra tashahud. All of that is adding, and all of that would require sujood sal after salams. So if that's hard, you just got to replay that in your mind, inshallah. The only time I'm making sujood sal before salams is if I miss one of these 2 things. Even if you're taking notes and you go back and look at the list, all the things that we discussed in terms of sujood sal before salams, they involve some version of omitting the Quran after Fatiha or sitting for the atashahud. Even if what you omitted was saying the Quran aloud or silently, it all somehow, some way will end up being a scenario where you missed one of those 2 things. That's really the only time you're going to make sujood sal before salams. So anytime you have a mistake that you correct that's other than those 2, you're going to end up making after salams. Follow me?
Oh, Jazakallah khair.
Wa iyaka. So that's, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Welcome. So you want to make sure this stuff becomes habitual. Even my teacher Sheikh Amin used to tell me, if you want, then you can you can do sujood saw in the nafila prayers as a way to give you a chance to practice, so that when the fard prayer comes, it'll be easier for you to do, the rules of sujood saw. That makes sense?
Alhamdulillah.
Alaikum salam. Is the brother Nathan who asked the question, is he still here? Or did he get kicked out? MashaAllah, he might have got kicked out. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we'll send him the video. I'm hoping maybe the video doesn't have this echo, and it's not coming from my computer because I have the YouTube off on my computer, so I don't know why there's still this background noise. But sometimes Allah do things to remind us that He's in charge and we're not in charge. So alhamdulillah, we keep going. So the next point, any other questions on what we just talked about? Maybe the video doesn't have this echo, and it's not coming from my computer because I have. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So the next point, when you miss something like a fard, for instance, sujood saw before salams, for a major sunnah or 3 minor sunnah or more, again, cancel the present salat with intention alone and proceed to the new prayer for previous. What do they mean by that? So I think we actually read this last week too, but I'll go through it again. Let's say you miss saying sujood saw before salams. That's the mistake you missed. And then you proceeded to make a new prayer, right? And then once you proceeded to start making a new prayer, you realize that you forgot to make sujood saw before salams. In this situation, you stop and you go back and you remake the prayer that you missed. You stop and you go back and remake the prayer that you missed. You were making dur, you forgot to say a tashahhud after the second rakat of dur, and you don't realize until you've already stood up to make asr. What do? You stop and you go back and make your dur again. So why? On the one hand, they say sujood saw before salams is not a fard, but the way they say it in this book, they say it's something like a fard. It's something like a fard, meaning even though it's not considered a fard, we treat it as a fard. We treat it as something that's wajib. We treat it as something that's mandatory. And so if you don't make sujood saw before salams, when you missed one of those two things that require you to make sujood saw before salams, you treat that like you've missed a fard, and you can't go back and simply make up that mistake because you've already sounded out of the prayer. If you caught it before you stood up to make a new prayer, then you could just make sujood saw after salams, and that would take the place of your sujood saw before salams. But if you don't catch it until you've already stood up and started to make a new prayer, then you actually have to cut that prayer and go back and remake it. Any questions about that? You can't go back and simply make up that. The last point we have in this section, when you are sitting for a tashahhud and you forget to say the tashahhud or some part of it, then you're ordered to go back and say it if the 4 parts of your body have not yet left the earth. And we actually covered this last week, so I'm recovering a lot of stuff that I didn't realize that I already covered last week. But basically they're saying that in terms of a tashahhud after the second rakat, between the second and third rakat, for every prayer other than Salatul Fajr, once your hands and your knees leave the earth, once your hands and your knees leave the ground, you can't go back and correct that. You have to continue with your prayer and you make sujood saw before salams for omitting that. Now, I think this part may be new, inshallah ta'ala. They said, what happens if you forget a fard and you forgot what rakat it's from? You forgot to make a fard, you forgot to make a fard, but you can't figure out what rakat you forgot to make the fard in. You know that there was a rakat where you forgot to make Fatiha, but you can't remember which rakat it was. You know there was a rakat where you forgot to make a sajda, but you can't remember what rakat it was. What do you do? It says, if you forgot a sujood in Salatul Asr, and you don't remember which rakat it's from, but you realize you forgot it while you're sitting for the tashahhud of the last rakat, right? So they give this scenario. You're sitting for the tashahhud of the last rakat of Salatul Asr, and you realize that you missed a sajda in one of the previous rakats, right? There's 2 possibilities. One possibility is that you missed the sajda in the last rakat. And if you missed the sajda in the last rakat, you would correct it by making the intention right? That you're not sitting for a tashahhud, but you're sitting for sajda in the last rak'ah. And then you would make the sajda that you missed, right? You would make the sajda that you missed. The other possibility is that the sajda you missed was from the first or second or third rak'ah, and now that rak'ah is canceled. So if you missed a sajda in the first or second or third rak'ah, and now you're sitting for a tashahhud in the fourth rak'ah, that means that one of those rak'ah are now canceled because it's missing a fard. And if you have a rak'ah that's missing a fard, you already made the ruku of the following rak'ah, you have to go back and make a new rak'ah to replace the incomplete rak'ah that's missing a fard. And so it was from the first or second or third rak'ah. So now that rak'ah is canceled, so you have to stand up and make one more rak'ah, right? In which case you will need to make sujood saw after salams, because now you have a 5 rak'ah prayer, because one of the rak'ahs was missing a sajda, was missing a fard. So you brought a new rak'ah to replace it. So now you have a 5 rak'ah prayer, and you have to make sujood saw after salams to fix it. Right? In which case you will need to make sujood saw after salam. Then they give the possibility, let's say you missed that sajda, but you realize it while you're standing, making the Fatiha of the last rak'ah. You're standing for Fatiha of the last rak'ah when you realize that you missed a sajda in a previous rak'ah, right? If the sajda you missed was from the third rak'ah, right, you're now in the fourth rak'ah, it was from the third rak'ah, right? You go back and you correct the third rak'ah, like you're in the fourth rak'ah standing for Fatiha, and you realize you missed sajda in the third rak'ah. What do? You sit back down in Jalsa, you make the sajda that you missed, and then you stand up to make the fourth rak'ah. And now you have this extra movement that you made when you stood up to make the fourth rak'ah before you realized that you had to fix the missing sajda in the third rak'ah, right? So you're going to make sujood saw after salams to correct that. But the other possibility is that it was from the first or second rak'ah, right? You're standing now for the fourth rak'ah of Salatul Asr, and you realize that you missed the sajda in the first or second rak'ah. That rak'ah where you missed the sajda is now canceled. So now your third rak'ah will take the place of your second rak'ah. Your third rak'ah will now take the place of the second rak'ah. You made 2 rak'ah, you made a third rak'ah, and now you're standing in your third rak'ah, and you realize that you missed the sajda in the first 2 rak'ah, right? I'm sorry. Yes, you missed the sajda in the front of the first 2 rak'ah. What you do is you sit, right? I'm sorry. What you do is you treat this third rak'ah like it's the second rak'ah. And so after you finish this third rak'ah, you're going to sit for a tashahhud. You may have already sat to make a tashahhud after your second rak'ah, but now your third rak'ah is taking the place of your first or second rak'ah. So you're going to sit once again at the end of this third rak'ah, because now the third rak'ah becomes like the second rak'ah. I'm saying it over and over again because I'm hoping that helps us clear, inshallah. So at the end of this rak'ah, you're going to sit to make a tashahhud, and then you're going to make 2 rak'ah after it. And then you're going to make sujood saw after salams, right? I'm sorry. You're going to make sujood saw before salams. So let me restate this so it doesn't get confusing. You're in the third rak'ah, and you realize that you missed sajda in your first or second rak'ah. You now treat this third rak'ah like it's the second rak'ah, because one of your previous first 2 rak'ah is now canceled because it's missing a sajda. So you treat that as if it were your second rak'ah, which means after you finish, you're going to sit down and make a tashahhud, right? Even though it's your third rak'ah, you're treating it like your second, so you're going to sit and make a tashahhud. And you're going to stand up, make 2 more rak'ah. Then when you finish, you're going to make sujood saw before salams. Why? Normally you'd make sujood saw after salams if you added a rak'ah, right? But now you're going to make sujood saw before salams. Why? Because one of those first 2 rak'ah that you missed, right, had some Quran after Fatiha in it. And when you were making this third rak'ah, that you're treating as your second rak'ah, even though you're treating it as your second rak'ah, you're only going to say Fatiha. You're only going to say Fatiha. You're not going to say some Quran after Fatiha in this third rak'ah that is now being treated as your second rak'ah. Because remember what we said last week, you can't leave a fard to make a sunnah, right? And so the scholars consider making some verses from Quran after the Fatiha like leaving a fard to correct the sunnah. You don't know if you missed that sunnah or not. So at the end, you're going to make sujood saw before salams, right? Because maybe that you do it, and maybe that you added and you omitted. So you're gonna make the sujood saw before salams in case you missed, right? And this is particularly because you don't know if the mistake that you made was in the second or the third rak'ah. So you're going to go back. So you're not going to go back and redo Quran again, but you're going to have to make sujood saw before salams because you may have added and omitted. And then the last point we have in the lesson, let's say you realize that you forgot to make sujood saw while you're standing to say a Fatiha of the third rak'ah. The last one, I think I misspoke. The last one was you're standing for the fourth rak'ah, but you're treating the third rak'ah as your second rak'ah. So maybe I should say this one more time so that it's not confusing. You were standing in the fourth rak'ah. This is the last scenario we just did. I'm saying it again. You're standing in the fourth rak'ah, but you realize that you missed something. You omitted a fard in one of the first two rak'ah. So now your third rak'ah is going to take the place of your second rak'ah, right? But now, this scenario, you realize that you forgot to make a sajda while you're standing to make Fatiha of the third rak'ah. One possibility is that you missed this in the second rak'ah. So you go back and you correct it by sitting in jalsa, making sajda, right? Making the sajda you missed, and then finishing your prayer from that point on, right? In which case you make sujood saw after salams. The other possibility is that it was from the first rak'ah. And if that's the case, the first rak'ah is now canceled. And so the second rak'ah becomes like your first rak'ah, right? And in this case, you're going to finish, you're going to make the two rak'ah as you normally would, you sit for a tashahhud, and then you're going to make two more rak'ah, and you're going to make sujood saw after salams. I'm going to stop there and ask, does anybody have any questions about any of that? That lesson, could be a little confusing. So does anybody have any questions about that, inshallah? Any questions about any of what we just said? We may even kind of review it, inshallah ta'ala, next week or the week after, just to hear it again. But does anybody have any questions about that? Doesn't seem like there are any questions, inshallah. Okay, so the last section of the book deals with the Quranic, what they call ta'weez, or sometimes you hear people call it a talisman, is the like English word, but carrying the Quran on your person, which is something people do for protection, for healing, things like that. So the Quran talisman, or the ta'weez. If you want to keep Quran, and there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ informed one of the Sahabas that wanted to use Quran for healing of their children, but the children were young and weren't at the point yet where they could memorize. They were having a hard time memorizing the Quran, so the Prophet ﷺ instructed them that they could have the kids wear the Quran around their neck. And so from this, we have the basis for what they call a ta'weez, for carrying the Quran. Some people who have like the wrong idea, they'll say, oh, you can't do this. They'll say, well, the Prophet ﷺ only gave that advice for these people in this specific situation. But the scholars, they say that the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said that this could be done, and he didn't give any clear indication that it was only for a person in a certain situation, that from that we can take the ruling that it's permissible, right? It's permissible for anybody to take some Quran, carry it with them for healing, for protection. things like this. Someone said, where can I find this hadith? This was brought up last week with a friend, and I wanted to share something to show us with it. No problem. Send me a text, inshallah, after the class, and I'll send you where you can find the hadith, inshallah ta'ala. So the lesson says the talisman or the ta'weez, alhamdulillah, no problem. The ta'weez should be kept in leather, right? It says you can use it for sickness, for fear, for the evil eye, or fear of evil jinn. Any of these things that people are worried about, they can carry a Quran. This is something that some of the scholars have preserved, the tradition of the early generations of Muslims of using particular verses to heal them or protect them. It says you should keep it in leather. What they mean really is that you need to keep it in something that's going to protect the Quran from getting wet or getting damaged or something like that. So most of the time you should put it in leather. Sometimes people will put it in a metal casing, different things. As long as you have it somewhere where it's not going to get, wet or damaged. People even put it in a wallet sometimes. They have a leather wallet. It doesn't have to be leather technically, but something like leather in the sense that something that's going to protect it from getting damaged or dirty. It can be worn during childbirth, right? So you'll find certain prayers women will wear when they're giving childbirth. It can be worn when a woman's on her menses. It can be worn when a person's in a state of impurity. So if somebody has Quran that's covered up like that, just a portion of Quran, they can carry it on their person, even if they're not in a state of ritual purity, right? There's another reason why it needs to be bound in some kind of pouch so that you're not actually touching it. You're not touching the pages of the Quran. Now, I would not advise having the whole Quran on your person, even if it's in a pouch or something like that, if you're in this state. But if it's just a page, a verse, a chapter, a couple of pages, and you have it bound in something that will prevent you from having to actually touch it with your physical hand directly, then you can carry it on your person, inshallah ta'ala. It can be worn inside the bathroom under some conditions. The old scholars did not allow this because of the differences in the bathrooms. If the bathroom is large enough for you to pass urine in one place and wash up in another place, then you may take it with you where you wash and hide it, right? They mention that the books say that Kanif, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right because it's in English writing, but Kanif is what they call the place where you actually go to the bathroom, where you remove your waste, when you go to the bathroom. So back in the day, you might have like the outhouse where you go and relieve yourself, and that's separate from the place where you wash. So if you're gonna wear a ta'weez, it's better not to take it in the place where you go to the bathroom, right? But you can take it into the area where you wash. And now that our modern bathrooms have the place where you wash and the bathroom all in one area, right? You can take it if you're going in an area, say to make wudu, you have the ta'weez in your pocket or underneath your shirt or something like that, and it's covered. You can go in the bathroom, make your wudu, wash your hands and whatnot, but you shouldn't have it on your person while you're actually going to the restroom. And yes, Sister Danielle, I see you have your hand.
Assalamualaikum, Ustadh. I had a question about this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, so this is reminding me of jewelry that has Quran on it. Like, I know there's some necklaces that have like Ayatul Kursi engraved in it. Is that similar to what you're describing? And
Absolutely.
I have one such necklace. And I'm wondering, like, if you go to the bathroom, do you have to take it off? Or if you tuck it in your shirt, can you still go to the stall? Like, what's the etiquette of wearing that kind of jewelry?
Yeah, so the scholars have different opinions about that. If you follow this, you're definitely safe. If you have it tucked under your shirt or something like that, when you go to wash your hands or make wudu, that's totally fine, right? But even if it's not in a leather pouch, in that situation, you're fine. But the question is, can you have it on your person if it's tucked in or something while you go to the bathroom? And there's different opinions about that, right? It's different opinions about that. I don't really feel comfortable or qualified to give you a definitive answer one way or another. Some teachers I've encountered will say that it's permissible. Some will say that it's better not to. I'm not sure whether they would say it's haram or makruh, to be honest. I would say if you're unsure, it's better if you can leave a necklace like that when you go to the bathroom. But there are scholars who say it's permissible. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're wearing a necklace and you forget to take it off, or you have to go to the bathroom, you can't put it anywhere, and you tuck it underneath your shirt, then some of the scholars will say this is permissible. And Allahu Alam as to whether or not that's a stronger opinion or not. We can ask some of our teachers, inshallah, to give you a more definitive answer. But I've encountered people with both opinions. So, if you have the ability to take it off, inshallah, when you actually use the restroom, this is safer. But I'm not going to tell you that it's haram. And inshallah, we can investigate to get some more clarity, inshallah ta'ala. Did you get that?
Yes, Ustad. I'm sorry. I was typing my response in the chat, but yes,
No problem.
I've just always wondered about what to do with the jewelry, and this is helpful.
Right, alhamdulillah. Me myself, I used to have something I used to wear. I don't wear it anymore, but I used to wear in that same kind of situation, So I want to lean towards saying this is permissible as long as you cover it, right? But I know that some of the scholars don't like it, so I'll leave it at that for now, inshallah, and we can investigate more, inshallah ta'ala. Tayyib. The next point, they say the mushaf, meaning the actual physical Quran, should not be carried into the bathroom, or should not be carried in general unless you're in a state of ritual purity, right? Unless you're in a state of ritual purity. So if you don't have wudu, you shouldn't be carrying the Quran. If it is in a box or a safe, it makes no difference, except if there's something of value like gold or diamonds, and you cannot leave this to make wudu. If you can't make wudu, then make a tayammum. What they mean by this is, if you shouldn't touch the Quran unless you have wudu, right? They make an exception for the person who's studying to memorize the Quran. The student who's actually studying actively to memorize the Quran, they say he or she, if they lose their wudu, you can still touch the Quran to memorize it. They give you some flexibility. But if you're just reading the Quran, for worship or for understanding, you're not an active student who's actively studying to memorize the Quran, you shouldn't touch the physical Quran when you don't have wudu. You can recite it from memory, but you shouldn't touch it. This is the stronger opinion. This is the opinion of the Malikis generally. And they say it doesn't matter if you have it in a box or a pouch or something like that. You should avoid touching it when you're not in wudu. Some say if it, like, let's say you're traveling, you have a mushaf and you have some gold or diamonds or something like that, and you can't afford to leave it outside of the bathroom because you may lose this thing that is a value. Then they say then you can carry it with you to make wudu. Some say you can make a tayammum instead of making wudu, right? But again, so there's differences of opinion with that. The safest thing is don't put yourself in that position. I remember I used to travel with a little Quran with me to read Quran until I learned this information. Now I don't do that. If you have like maybe a few pages of Quran that you want to bring with you to read, that you can have and you can leave in your bag when you go to the bathroom. You can have with you covered, like the leather, like the ta'weez. If it's covered up in a bag or something like that, and you have to, do what you have to do, or you have to carry the bag when you don't have wudu, you can do that. But you shouldn't carry the entire Quran, the whole Quran, unless you have wudu, even if it's in a bag or something like that. That shouldn't be happening. Now, we're in a privileged state because now we have the phone. And the scholars say the phone, some of the scholars, they say we don't really know what to say about the phone. This is a new kind of predicament, but it's not really feasible to ask the people not to carry their phones that we use every day, when they go to the bathroom and they're traveling or something like that. You're not going to leave your phone outside the airport bathroom, for instance, right? So the phone becomes this gray area where, alhamdulillah, you can use it. You can put it in your pocket, go to the bathroom, do what you got to do. And you come out, you open up your Quran app and you read the Quran, right? So the phone is, I guess in some ways we can say, a workaround that allows us to still do it. Someone said this doesn't apply to translations of the Quran if there's no Arabic in the text, right? Different scholars have different opinions. Sheikh Amin taught us that Dr. Dunya was of the opinion that you should treat the translation of the Quran with respect the same way you would treat the Arabic Quran. So technically it's different. And some of the scholars will say the English Quran is okay, but some of the scholars say, no, you still got to give the English Quran that level of respect too. Personally, I would avoid even taking the English Quran with me in the bathroom. I don't travel with it. I don't put myself in that situation. But I have given an English Quran to a non-Muslim. I have given an English Quran to a non-Muslim. And of course, the non-Muslim doesn't know anything about wudu, and they still reading the Quran in English. I don't think my teacher, Sheikh Amin, would actually advise that. He would probably say it's better to give the non-Muslim books about belief, books about the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and avoid giving them the Quran. But we know in the era that we live in, you know, if somebody want to get their hands on the Quran, they're gonna do it. You know, and it may be good because this has helped people come to Islam. So if you have somebody that's not Muslim, they're asking for a copy of the Quran or something, you can give them the all English one, and inshallah ta'ala, it's okay because they're not touching the Arabic. But you carrying the English Quran with you, right? I would suggest you avoid taking it in the bathroom or holding it when you don't have wudu the same way you would the Arabic Quran. And Allahu Alam, right? Allahu Alam. Like I said, there's differences of opinion with that. So if you have, you know, like if you are a follower of, you know, Sheikh Mahi or something like that, and you want to ask him, you know, for personal advice, how should I treat this English Quran? Then, you know, alhamdulillah, you should do that, you know. Particularly I'm thinking about the sisters who their ability to touch the English Quran when they are, you know, having the cycle may be the relief of a burden. So I don't want to take that away without, you know, proper consideration. So I don't know, you know, what Sheikh Mahi's opinion or Imam Sheikh Tijani's opinion would be about that. But I know my teacher, he was of the opinion, Sheikh Amin was of the opinion that you should give the English Quran similar respect as you give the Arabic Quran. And like I said, me personally, the one exception I'll make is sometimes I've given the English Quran to the non-Muslim because I know they're gonna read the Quran, and this may help them come to Islam. So I'd rather them touch the English Quran than touch the Arabic Quran before they know about purity. And I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that's helpful. Sister Tasneem, I see you have your hand up. Bismillah.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to share something that was shared with me in regards to women reading the Quran on their menses. Because the question was posed of like, what do the women do when they're actually actively studying hifz? And in one instance, and of course this is before everyone had a cell phone with the apps in the Quran. So like in the past, the women would have they would study the juice because it's not the Quran in its entirety. So if they were on their menses, they would just study by whatever juice they were on and just hold that portion. But now a lot more sisters are just using the app when they're on their menses, so that way they're not physically touching the mus'haf. Right. And this is something that, you know, alhamdulillah, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, I mean, when Sheikh Amin, when they would ask him about the phone, he didn't like to answer the question about what to do with the phone, because he said, you know, this is a new thing that the scholars haven't necessarily given concrete answers to. Maybe that's changing now. But hold on one second. Are you getting ready to close? Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go shortly, but we're almost done, inshallah. So the next section, they actually, you know, they discuss that again, this was Sheikh Amin's opinion, that the Prophet ﷺ advised people, the Muslims, not to give the non-Muslims the Mus'haf, not to give the non-Muslims the Quran. You know, and his opinion was it's better if you give them literature that speaks about Islam on an introductory level, right? And, you know, like I said, that different people have different opinions about this. You know, if you follow the opinion of Sheikh Amin, that's safer for you. But I myself have been in situations where I've taken some liberty with that because, again, we live in a society where the people don't have to come to the Muslims to get the Quran, right? The people are going to get the Quran from the internet, from wherever. So if they're going to get it, it's better if they have the English one. Wallahu a'lam, right? But also, even if you're a store owner, you own a bookstore, you shouldn't handle the Quran unless you have wudu, right? But if you're a teacher or a student, then there's some allowance. Even if you're studying maybe fiqh or tafsir, and there comes to be a time where you need to be able to go to the Mus'haf to get an answer to a question or to make a point in that moment, the scholars say you have some liberty in those cases to be able to touch the Quran without wudu. And then lastly, he mentions that the enemies of Islam, they plotted to distribute copies of the Quran that had bad information in them, which they had put in there by their own hands. The Muslims found out about that, and they purchased the books and they kept them away from the public. A person wishing to teach disbelievers, people who aren't Muslim yet, a person who wishes to teach them should write them letters and teach them with their voice or distribute other books, but not the Mus'haf. So again, it's better if you can do this, right, with the non-Muslim person. Right? It's better if you can just teach them by your own understanding or other books that introduce people to the Quran. That's the better way. Lastly, they say the translation into other languages is also considered the Mus'haf. Like we said, Sheikh Amin was of the opinion you should still treat that as a Mus'haf. And he mentions that Dr. Suleiman Dunya rahmatullahi had been a scholar since 1944. He was a student for 19 years before that. And Dr. Dunya said he feels that the Quran is difficult for him on some points. So how do you think other people who aren't Muslim will be able to understand it easily? So you have to be careful not to give the Quran to somebody who isn't Muslim and may not have the ability to really understand what it is that they're reading. And alhamdulillah, we finished. I have to stop here very abruptly. Jazakumullah khair. We're going to make a very short dua today because I have to go. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق الناس بالحق والهادي إلى صراط المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم ربنا آتنا في حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله